Greetings! Catechism Clarence here. You'll notice that Mr. Monkeybottom and I are not recording in our usual location at the church this week. As it turns out, Mr. Monkeybottom and I have been exposed to COVID this week, so we're self-isolating here in Mr. Monkeybottom's basement until we get our test results back. But it will take a lot more than COVID-19 to stop this mighty catechetical locomotive, I'll tell you that. Before we get to this week's question, though, a quick update on Pastor Bruce. Some of you children have been asking, and we're happy to report that, yes, he did indeed make it back to Earth safely. In fact, we have some footage here of his arrival. Very exciting! A special thanks again to the elders at Grace Church for providing the budget for our space program. Now, on to the business at hand. Catechesis! First, let's review last week's question. Question 13. Can anyone keep the law of God perfectly? Answer: since the fall, no human being has been able to keep the law of God perfectly. As Pastor Bruce mentioned when he was in orbit last time, things are not meant to be this way, of course, and that's the topic of the question this week. Question 14. Did God create us unable to keep his law? Answer: no. But because of the disobedience of Adam and Eve, we are all born in sin and guilt, unable to keep God's law. Since no one obeys God's law perfectly, and indeed no one can, we might think, well, there must be something wrong with God's law, then. It must be too hard to keep, or unfair, or something like that. A law that can't be kept surely can't be a very good law. But that's not the case with God's law at all. We all know that it is good, very good, in fact. What keeps us from keeping God's law is a problem with us, not with the law. We're the problem, the whole human race. And the reason for that is because of something that happened long, long ago, back at the very beginning of human history. To illustrate, Mr. Monkeybottom has agreed to illustrate. It turns out he's something of an artist. Who knew? Well, let's go ahead then. Mr. Monkeybottom will show us some artwork he's prepared, and I'll provide some explanation. Ah, yes. This is a picture of you, boys and girls. A picture of you and me and everyone. And we all have a mom and dad. We came from somewhere. And our mom and dad came from somewhere too. They came from a grandmother and a grandfather. And they came from a grandmother and a grandfather too. Back and back, generation upon generation, all the way back to the beginning, and to Adam and Eve, our first parents. Adam and Eve kept God's law perfectly, and they were happy. God made them this way. He made them happy. Happy to love him, and happy to keep his law, which they did. At first, but not forever. God had commanded them not to eat of the fruit of one tree in particular in the garden, but they thought they knew better than God, and so they sinned. They disobeyed God's law. They sinned against him. And when they did disobey God, something changed in them. Their hearts changed, and they stopped loving God and stopped loving his law. Their hearts became like stone, filled with sin and guilt, and unable to love God and obey his law. And when they had babies, little children, that hard heart that came from their disobedience was in their children too, all of them. They were all born in sin and guilt now, and their children after them, and their children, generation after generation, all the way down to your family and mine. to our grandmoms and granddads, then down to our moms and dads, and finally down to us, me and you, boys and girls. This is why all of us are born in sin and guilt and unable to keep God's law, because of Adam and Eve, our first parents' sin in the garden. Well, thank you, Mr. Monkeybottom. Or should I say, Monsieur Monkeybottom? Ho, 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 ho. Oh, sorry. Yes, that is a rather sad story, isn't it? It is exactly what the Bible teaches, though. Romans 5, verse 12 says, "Therefore, just as sin came into the world through one man, and death through sin, and so death spread to all men because all sinned." Now, there is a happy ending to this sad story, though. There was one child born of a woman who was without sin, Jesus Christ himself. And through him, God would save all the rest of us. But more on that soon. For now, let's review our question. Question 14. Repeat after me. Did God create us unable to keep his law? Answer, no. But because of the disobedience of Adam and Eve, we are all born in sin and guilt, unable to keep God's law. Very good, very good. Well done, boys and girls. Well done, Mr. Monkeybottom. Thank you for your hard work this evening. That's all for now. Sleep well, children. Goodbye, goodbye.